Hi guys, welcome back to Econ Time with SK. So grab your notebooks, your favorite cup of coffee, and let's get started. As I mentioned in the previous video, what is important is that you understand how to interpret the cross elasticity of demand. Okay, so let's say that calculate the cross elasticity of demand for two goods, and we find out that it is something like minus 3.75. Remember what we learned. The minus sign always tells me whether the good is substitute or complement. Because remember the formula for the elasticity, cross elasticity of demand is percentage change in demand for good B due to percentage change in price of good A. Okay, so first we want to figure out what is the relationship between two goods, right? And we know that the minus sign tells me that this and this, they're moving in opposite direction. So when price, let's say, falls, demand for this particular good is actually increases. Now, what's the relationship between good A and good B? That we understand by looking at what's happening behind the scenes. All right. So behind the scenes, we know that by the law of demand, quantity demanded of good A, it is going to move up, right? So what are we seeing here? We are seeing that these two goods, they are moving in the same direction, which means they are jointly consumed, which means we are dealing with complements. So now we're done with interpreting what this negative sign actually means. What about this number? Well, this number basically, for this, we're going to look at the number line that we learned about, right? Where 1 is sort of the deciding value. So if it's more than 1, we know that we're dealing with elastic demand. And if it's less than 1, then we know we're dealing with inelastic demand. All right. So here, when we see minus 3.75, remember I told you we're going to focus only on the value. So when you take the modulus, essentially you're looking at 3.75. So this, of course, is greater than 1, which means that we have elastic CED. What does elastic CED actually mean? It means that demand for good B is very responsive to change in price of good A. So what that means is that, you start consuming more of good A, your demand for good B also shoots up. It just means that we are dealing with very good complements. So when we say very good complements, essentially what we're trying to say is that they go very well together. Okay, so let's take the case of coffee, and let's say that people insist on having sugar with coffee because otherwise it just turns out to be too bitter and too sad of a drink, right? So here basically what we are saying is that so little increase in consumption on coffee and the consumption of sugar just zooms up, right? So that is what this very high number, this elastic CD actually means. On the other hand, let's take cross elasticity of demand, which is something like minus 0.89. This minus sign tells us that we're dealing with complements, whereas this here, this number itself tells us, well, you know what, it is less than 1, so we're dealing with inelastic CED. So what this number essentially tells us about the magnitude of change is basically that when the price of good A, let's say it goes down, the demand for good B, it goes up, but by a smaller amount, right? Which means essentially we are saying that demand for good B not so responsive to change in price of good A, indicating that they're complements, but they're not so jointly consumed. Okay, can you think of an example for such a good? Well, one example could be phones and phone chargers. And now you know that a lot of phones don't even include the chargers with the phone when they sell it, right? And that sort of reflects that they are complements, but not so jointly consumed. So let's actually see it with an arrow diagram. So when the price of phone goes down, right here, then the quantity demanded for phones is likely to go up, right? But at the same time, we see that the demand for chargers doesn't go up that much, right? It doesn't go up to the same extent. And the reason for that, of course, is that just because you've bought a new phone doesn't mean you immediately need to go and update your charger as well, because it's very likely that your charger from your old phone will also work on the new phone, right? Because usually we upgrade the models, but the charger remains the same across models. Okay, so that would be an example of goods which would have less responsive demand to a change in price, meaning that your CD, so the modulus of the CD can be less than 1. Okay, so that completes our discussion on how to interpret CD when the goods are complements. All right, guys, I shall see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.